Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to Building a Product Security Incident Response Team, Learnings from the Hivemind. We're in Mandalay, BC&D, in case you're wondering. Speaking with us today is Kimberly Price. She's the Senior Director of Researcher Operations. A couple of housekeeping items. If you would, stop by the Business Hall located in Bayside A-B today. And remember, the welcome session is running, or the welcome reception is running from 5:30 to 7. Black Hat Arsenal is on in the Palm Foyer on level 3. And join us tonight for the Pony Awards in here at 6:30. So if you could all put your phones on quiet, vibrate, or turn them right off, and welcome Kimberly.
Thank you. So I'm going to stand up here because the podium's really high. And I'm sorry for you folks way over there. Thank you so much for coming to the 5:30 in the afternoon presentation. I wasn't sure that many people would be here, so I'm pretty pleased with the audience. I'm going to get things started. We only have 30 minutes, so let's start with who am I, why am I here, why would you listen to me about this? I am currently Senior Director of Research Operations at BugCrowd. We're a bug bounty company, and we have over 30,000 freelance security researchers around the world of a wide variety of skill sets that do web, mobile, and IoT application testing, pen tests, submit bug reports. That's not what today's talk is about. Previously, I worked in a product security incident response center, and that's a really long phrase, so we're going to call that a PCERT for the purposes of this talk, and that's what this talk is about. I've done a bunch of other things. I've been a data analyst. I've investigated worms and been involved in internet crime investigations. If you're an RPGer, I'm a lawful good, defender for life. So you guys can read the agenda. While you're reading that, I'm going to tell you why I'm giving this talk at all. Earlier this year, I was doing a series of blog posts at work about vulnerability disclosure and why this is a good thing. I was trying to counsel our customers on why coordinated vulnerability disclosure with researchers, once an issue is patched, allowing the researcher to blog about it, giving them acknowledgement, is a good thing, and how it shows your customers that you have a mature security response cycle, you're responding to vulnerabilities, you're patching issues, you're not just sticking your head in the sand, and that demonstrating that will encourage other researchers to also report vulnerabilities to you. What would an advisory look like? What are the key components that go in there? When do you issue an advisory? I could find no resources on the internet that I could point people to and say, and here are some examples. And so I submitted a talk. I thought, hey, maybe there are people who need this. And between the time the CFP for Black Hat closed and my talk got accepted, thankfully, I had a number of customers and small companies reach out to me and say, okay, so we've got vulnerability reports. Now what do we do with them? And so I ended up doing a number of consulting calls leading into this. So I hope some of what I have to share today will help some of you. I am not going to give you any answers. I'm going to help you ask the right questions when you get back to work about how do we want to build this for our environment. The target audience today is small to medium businesses that don't have a security response team. Perhaps you are a small company. You have maybe 1 or 2 security resources that are dedicated security resources. Maybe they're working on crypto, architecture, security features in your application. They may not be incident responders by profession or by training. So helping you have some of the key tools to help them do their job. The other customers that I'm finding need this content are large companies that didn't really think they were a software company. Retailers, maybe like people who have an online presence, but that's just the front end of their business. And now they're realizing, oh, I have to care about the security of that too. So if you're currently in an incident response team, this is going to be fairly high level for you. Also, with just 30 minutes, I'm not going to have time to go super deep. I do have a number of free resources I'm going to give you a link to at the end of the presentation that offers more detail. And you're always welcome to email me, tweet at me, and I would be happy to talk to you some more. What about ISO standards? There's an ISO standard for vulnerability disclosure. It wasn't available for free when I submitted the talk, but it is now. And it is thorough. It's an excellent document. It was written by experts in the field of vulnerability disclosure. It is 42 pages long. I am not going to go through the entire ISO standard for you today. It is one of the links that I will provide at the end of the presentation, so you can go get it, download it, go through all the detailed definitions and processes and things. It's awesome that it's available for free, and I just saw Katie Masuris walk in the room, and she was one of the contributors to writing the standard and getting it available to the public for free, so mad props to Katie. There is a related standard that is also very important and I would recommend, however, it is not free, and that is ISO standard 30111, which is on vulnerability handling processes. So again, if you want to go deeper than today's presentation, these are some good resources for you. So I'm breaking today's presentation into 3 sections: people, processes, and infrastructure and technology. And we're going to start off with people. All 3 of these things are going to be very interrelated. There are, as I was talking to companies, I talked to about a dozen companies about what their incident response teams looked like, how they were built both in the beginning and what they grew to over time, and how they functioned. And I found that the 2 main differentiators on what the team looked like came down to what's the software, what's the technology? Is it a service or cloud-based where the end user doesn't have to install an update? You're patching it. Maybe it's a server-side thing in a web service. And so you don't have to necessarily issue an advisory to tell the customer to take action to protect themselves. Or it's client-based software that an IT admin or an end user has to do something with to secure. That was a critical difference in how the teams were structured and how they functioned. The other thing, of course, came down to resources. You're not going to be able to necessarily just go out and hire 5 people tomorrow. And even if you got the headcount for 5 people tomorrow, these are hard roles to fill in the current economy. Everybody is looking for security talent. So the goal of today's talk is to help you identify what are the things you might want on your team and how are you going to build them in what order. So what we typically saw, oh, sorry, my animation didn't work. That was supposed to be like a build slide. So when user interaction was required, we saw a technical program manager, an application security engineer, and an optional comms person, depending on how big the company was. And that comms person would sort of dotted line into the corporate PR and marketing organization, but sat in the security team. In organizations that were software services or cloud-based, they typically just relied on their centralized comms organization because they didn't have to publish advisories. So there wasn't as much dedicated comms work to do. And sometimes in the services and cloud-based team, the technical program manager was optional. And again, that was a team-by-team decision. We'll talk next about what the different roles do so that you can decide, is that something we would want? So the typical role responsibilities for the technical program manager, and I want to be clear, this is a technical program manager, not just a project manager that's checking off boxes on a process. They're doing the initial triage of the vulnerability. They're doing documentation throughout the vulnerability investigation. So while your application security engineer is documenting the proof of concept, the underlying vulnerability, the technical program manager is making sure all of that is getting documented clearly. They're documenting mitigations and workarounds. What are the affected and unaffected products? Because at the end of all of this, if you are releasing an advisory, that was typically written by the technical program manager. They're handling a lot of the prioritization discussions and reporting. And that reporting could be to the leadership team about vulnerability trends in your applications. It could be to the researcher that reported the vulnerability, maintaining that communication and status update cycle. So the technical program manager is still very technically involved with the vulnerability, but it's the application security engineer that's doing the technical repro work, the proof of concept exploit, code review, variant hunting. One of the interesting differences between client-based software and services in most of the companies I talk to, in a lot of the services companies and cloud-based applications, the application security engineer would write and check in the fix themselves. And in the client-based software companies, the application security engineer would consult with the product developers who would do the code fix. So again, what works for your organization? Do you want your application security engineers touching your production code, or do you want them consulting with the people who wrote it to begin with? So that's a decision point for you to make. Frequently, the application security engineer will, once the fix is complete, because they have that hacker mindset, can I break it? Is your fix robust enough that we're not going to release it and turn around and find a way around it, and now we're back into fix phase? And they're going to review the advisory if you have to release one for technical accuracy. If you are in one of those organizations where you feel having a dedicated comms person is important, they're reviewing the advisory, but they're reviewing it to make sure it's not inflammatory. It's not going to scare customers. It's not going to give press the opportunity to mischaracterize the vulnerability. The press wants to get clicks and views, and they're not bad people, but if you scare them, they will publish scary things, and they don't. So your comms and PR person, they know exactly how to word things so that it doesn't sound like the earth is burning when it's not. If your comms person says to you, do we have to say remote code execution? That's really scary. You have the wrong comms person. A good security comms person understands you're going to use industry standard terms to competently and confidently tell customers, this is what the problem is. We have a fix. And if you aren't able to implement the fix yet, here are the workarounds. And they're going to help you do that in a very sane, rational, calm way. They're also going to be your customer support liaison, because you have technical resources who shouldn't be spending all their time necessarily sending emails to customers and customer support teams, so your comms person can help with that. And handle press releases and responses. And again, as I mentioned, it's not only the technology base, but your financial resources. When I was talking to all of these companies, the comms person was typically the last addition to the team. A lot of the comms responsibilities fell on the technical program manager. So they would start with the application security engineer, grow to a point where they added the technical program manager, and then grow to a point where they added a comms person. So let's talk a little bit about process and across these companies, what were some of the trends? But before we get into that, let's talk about security development lifecycle. And this comes back to why I'm giving this talk at all. We start with training. We work through 7 phases to response, go back into training for your next product cycle. In phase 6 of release, one of the steps is define your incident response plan. And through all the prior stages, most SDL resources available online will make recommendations. They'll have white papers. They'll suggest tools. When you get to define your incident response plan, that's pretty much all you get told. And then in phase 7, it literally will say, implement your response plan. Well, what's in your response plan? So this is why I'm going to send you home with a lot of questions, because I want to help you figure out what do we put in our response plan based on what other people have put in theirs. So the incident response process typically looks like a standard vulnerability management process. You identify the issue, and that maybe the researcher or a customer reports to you. Maybe you have a beta program and a vulnerability gets reported through it. However it happens, and a vulnerability is identified. You assess the impact. You dev and test the fix. You release the fix, potentially with a CVE associated, depending on what the vulnerability is, if it qualifies for a CVE. And then you have the post-release customer support. Who here uses third-party libraries and open source code? You didn't find out about the vulnerability until FreeType released their advisory, and now you can start your incident response process. And you're doing incident response while public information is available already. So you're under a different set of pressure to patch things versus if someone reports something directly to you that's in your native code and nobody else knows about it. So there are some internal policies that you will want to define. And as I said, I'm not giving you answers, I'm giving you questions. What's your vulnerability prioritization model? What happens when you have 150 vulnerabilities with a CVSS of 7.5 and higher? How do you pick which one to fix first? First in, first out? Last in, last out? Throw dice? What's your plan on picking what to fix first? Because they're all bad. So define what your acceptable business risks are. Define what your priorities are. I've seen companies that have a very, very high priority on integrity and trust of the platform. And so spoofing vulnerabilities that some companies may think are not that big a deal, they will treat as a critical vulnerability. Even though the CVSS score may be relatively low, they're adamant that they want no spoofing vulnerabilities. So think about philosophically what is most important to your company and weight your prioritization accordingly. What are your service level agreements in regards to remediation? And this is not something you're going to sit in a conference room and decide independently. You want to work with your development team and talk about realistically, if we have a critical vulnerability, what's the timeline that we can get a fix implemented and deployed in, and how are we going to measure success for that? What are the criteria for blocking a release if a vulnerability hasn't been fixed for it? And getting that buy-in and agreement with your engineering team and with your leadership team. I mentioned what are the escalation paths. That comes down to when are you blocking shipping. But it also is, it's 11 p.m. on a Saturday night and you just got a really bad vulnerability report. How do you decide if you call and wake up the VP? Do you know? Have you thought about it? Don't figure that out when you've got the vulnerability. Think about it ahead of time so you can simply invoke your response plan and say, okay, it meets these criteria. We're going to pick up the phone. It's the red phone to the boss, and we're going to wake them up for this. When do you release a public advisory? I mentioned earlier, if the customer has to do something to protect themselves, you have to tell them. They won't just know. And if you release an update and you don't tell them it has security fixes in it, they may not install the update right away. It may not be a hurry. How many people leave updates until they're about to come to Black Hat and they're like, oh, yeah, I should update all these apps. Yeah, hands going up. I did it too. So you have to tell them there's a vulnerability, because here's the other problem. If you silently patch things, malicious hackers do code diffs and they go look for the changes, and your end users won't do that. And so now the end user doesn't know they need to install a fix, but the people you're trying to protect them against do. So, and as I mentioned, when is the emergency response indicated? Once you've defined your emergency response plan, do a couple practice drills, like maybe one a year, and put the team through the paces and make sure all the call charts work and you get hold of the right people and it all happens. So, infrastructure and technology. Here are some things that you should absolutely have as part of your PCERT. And the first one is a vulnerability disclosure policy. I cannot tell you how many times I have had a researcher come to me in my current job or my prior jobs and say, I found a vulnerability in customer X. I don't know how to get a hold of them and tell them. I've seen researchers look through LinkedIn to try to find the right person at a company that has security in their title and just randomly in-mail them and be like, hey, how do I tell you about a vulnerability? Some researchers don't even think to go to that angle. They go to Twitter and they say, hey, company, I found a bug in your software. And maybe your social media team will handle it correctly. Maybe. Wouldn't it just be easier if you had a page up that said, here's how to report a vulnerability? And so this is one of the resources that I will provide at the end of the talk. It's a link to a generic boilerplate responsible disclosure or coordinated disclosure policy that you can put on your web page. It tells researchers how to report to you. It also sets some expectations around how to report, what your response timelines are. Keep in mind, a researcher may only report one vulnerability to you, and you may have 45 researchers that report a vulnerability to you every day. They don't know you got 45. They only know about the one they sent you. And so their expectations and a response may be unrealistic. So you have an opportunity by publishing your disclosure policy to say, you can expect a response within this period of time, and let them know what that is. You will want to, in your customer knowledge base and in your support documentation, have a way for your customers to quickly see all the security-related content that, without having to just keyword search security, whether that is a specific advisory case number or some other way to structure that. And researcher acknowledgements, Hall of Fame, whatever you want to call it, it seems trivial. It's like the blue ribbon, thanks for reporting something. But at the same time, it acknowledges that you value their work, that you appreciate their partnership, helps build a sense of community and trust. Some of the technical tools you're going to want. I mentioned your disclosure policy. Think about, how do you want to receive reports? There's structured data forms and there's unstructured. Unstructured, you have email with a PGP key typically. Gives you a great opportunity for dialogue, but you can't really, like, every report is going to look different based on the researcher that sends it to you. You could structure the data by creating a web form, maybe even pipe the web form into your own bug database where it's just going right in. But how do you then have a dialogue with the researcher? Things to consider and think about as you're setting up your PCERT. How do you want to capture the investigation details? I'm going to go into more detail on this in just a minute, but I mentioned that the technical program manager is documenting all throughout the investigation, and the reality is the stuff your engineering team needs to fix the vulnerability is just one piece of the puzzle. There's a whole lot of other things you need to document, but it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to build a custom system. You can take Jira and add some fields and make it work for you. And I asked earlier, who uses third-party code? If you use third-party code, you're going to need more tools. There's trade-offs in third-party code. This is kind of my jam. I talk about third-party library vulnerabilities a lot. You're going to need a source code scanner to tell you what libraries you use where. You cannot count on your developers to keep track of that. They're busy, they're writing features. And as long as legal got a license, they figure they're good. So you want to know what you use where, and you want to have a vulnerability intelligence feed that's going to tell you what vulnerabilities are in those libraries so you can go fix them. And I would highly, highly recommend a talk that's happening tomorrow by Jake Koons and Christine Gadsby. And Christine is actually going to talk about, she's the director of incident response at BlackBerry. And she is going to talk about how they took a source code scanner and a vulnerability intelligence feed and saved the company not only significant amounts of money, but improved their product security. So they've gone and taken something that we've been talking about in the industry theoretically and made it very practical and real world. And so I'm a big fan of that talk. So I mentioned what your dev team needs to fix the bug is not the same thing as what your management team needs. And in the free resources, I provide a checklist of all the data fields you should capture during the investigation. And you're going to look at it and you're going to say, we don't need all this information to fix the bug. And you don't. But in a year, your leadership team is going to want to know, what kind of vulnerabilities did we have in the last year? Where should we invest in training? Oh, hey, you're telling me that mitigation that we spent the time to put in reduced the severity of like a significant number of vulnerabilities? Awesome, let's invest in more of those. You're going to have to send different kinds of reports to your leadership team, and your customers still want to know something different. Yes, there is overlap, but you want to document everything at the time of the investigation. So quickly, we're going to run through a few pitfalls. And I had to have at least one key. Avoid the alligators. So some of the pitfalls that teams have talked about and that I wanted to share with you today so that you don't reinvent the wheel are things like document. I keep bringing this up. But if you wait until, so let's say you're cloud-based and you got the vulnerability report and you're going to fix it really quickly and you're going to move on. In a year, when your management team wants to know about the efficacy of your security team, or if your customers want security assurances that you have been responsive and addressing things, you can't retroactively go back and document all the vulnerabilities that you've worked on. You're not going to remember them all. You're going to have to reinvestigate them. It's just better to document in real time. If you have to release an advisory, it's even worse, because then you're like, wait, now I have to document everything about this vulnerability. That was like 4 months ago. I don't remember. Like, you're going to investigate the same bug twice just so you can write it up. So every team I talked to said, just write it, like document it, and you've got it and you're done. Failures to prioritize effectively. A number of teams struggled with, as I mentioned earlier, you have a ton of vulnerabilities. How do you pick which one to fix first? How do you work with the dev team on that? So they really emphasized be clear on what your prioritization model is. And then there was failure to define stakeholders and key roles. So the incident manager or the program manager thought the application security engineer was doing something and other way around. If you didn't have really clear roles, it led to conflict, and that's a problem. Conflict ends up fundamentally costing money because you're wasting time sorting things out and making mistakes. And failure to communicate effectively with product development. Let's be clear, no dev team ever wants to see email or a phone call from the CERT. You are always bringing bad news. You are always pulling them off a feature. You are always telling them their baby is ugly and there's a bug in their code and they have to go fix it. And so it can be a very conflict and adversarial laden relationship. So demonstrate that you understand their priorities. Demonstrate that you understand trade-offs have to be made, and develop that positive and healthy working relationship. And I'm sorry, I accidentally have that slide twice. Okay, free resources. If you go to that page, and I will tweet this page, I'm KYM_possible, Kim Possible. I have a link to the disclosure policy basic template, the investigative data collection checklist of all the fields that I would recommend that you collect in your vulnerability database field. The advisory checklist, what goes in an advisory typically, and customers are used to consuming and figuring out, okay, here's what I need to apply, here's what affects me, here's what doesn't. And a link to the free download of the ISO standard on vulnerability disclosure. So my next slide is simply saying if you have any questions, I will leave this up for just a second more so folks can get that URL. And all right, thank you so much for coming. I think I have used all of my time. And feel free, if you have any questions, I know this was high level. It was not giving answers, but asking questions. If you would like to talk further, if you want to talk about your specific scenario or situation, go deeper on anything, shoot me an email, tweet at me. I'm here all through DEF CON, and I would be more than happy to help you out. So, thank you.